Hello and welcome to the Empower Couples podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman.
And I'm Jocelyn Freeman, but you all just know us as the Freemans.
And this episode is the 7-year itch, when marriage dissatisfaction peaks, and then what you can do about it at any point, not just the 7 years.
So I hope we can all agree that longevity, meaning how long you stay together, is not the only important factor. What should be equally important is satisfaction, fulfillment. It's not like, yeah, let's just survive the next 40 years together just because we said that, right? And so today's episode really will provide you with some clarity, no matter the stage that you're at in the relationship, whether you are together for 2 years so far, or you've been together for 30 plus years. Truly, the points we're going to give you are important to realize at any point.
Yeah. And, there are, from a science perspective, and the science that studies relationships is actually social psychology. So there are a lot of different ways that people have tried to measure relationship success. And like you said, one would be to say duration. And I don't think that too many people only use that metric, because you can be together a long time and not even be happy. And so then happiness would be another way to measure it, or love. But science has really identified satisfaction as the key measurement for the quote unquote success of marriages. And personally, I like it because, as simple as we can make it, satisfaction then can also give us a conversation about love and happiness, but also fulfillment. And then if you have that over a long period of time, that makes more sense on the type of success we're all looking for.
And of course, satisfaction is a subjective experience. And so we're going to get into some specific ways you could think about that and kind of measure it within your relationship as we go. But first, some of you are probably like, what is the 7-year itch though? Because some of you probably have heard it, some of you haven't. And at first, that term really was coined in the 50s. Actually, Marilyn Monroe acted in a movie that used that term. And then it kind of culturally, people were using it. And then people were asking, is this actually true? Is there something called the 7-year itch? And so there's been studies trying to prove it. And there's going to be a lot of arguments for it being true, not being true. But more recently, there is been one of the largest meta-analysis papers. So going back to our science days, right? Meta-analysis is when you really are looking and analyzing at a lot of different studies and trying to find trends. And so this is one of the largest research papers that found, in looking at a lot of different data, a lot of different studies, that actually dissatisfaction, so not being as satisfied in the relationship, was at its highest around year 10 together. So maybe it's not called the 7-year itch. Maybe it's more accurately the 10-year itch.
And one thing to add, noticing that it's peaking was something that was interesting, because it did trend downwards, or you could say went more towards satisfaction after this peak period. And so there was no other time. It almost seems like the longer people were together after that period, the more satisfied they were. And there's also other studies sort of independently that as the individual ages, people seem to be happier. And when you think about that at first, you're like, well, would that be the case? Because,
you're more isolated, or...
Well, I'm young, I'm fit, I'm like earning money, I have all these expenses, I can do whatever I want. And the main takeaway I got from, actually, it was Adam Grant, the social psychologist. It was really that people's mindset about challenges and stress changed as they age. Because the more you age, or just the older you are, you've been through a lot more, and you tend to realize that you get through things. And so your approach to challenges in the future is probably going to be okay. That's the simplest way to say it, right? So your happiness goes up because it's like, you've been through this. Like a lot of people in the stock market, it's like, okay, we hit a down. This is what happens. It's a cycle, but we always come back up. So take that in regards to this period with marriage as well.
So one more thing that's interesting about this, I mean, we could geek out with you guys on like the nuances, the data, the research, the theories, and we don't want to overcomplicate it. We're going to get into some very practical things you can focus on. But here's something interesting to consider. that couples, whether they, had the first couple years, they felt like honeymoon, which I think to all of us have experienced at different degrees, that honeymoon stage, right? The excitement, the chemicals, the attraction, that just exciting newness. And that isn't the same thing as getting into a stabilized relationship. But here's something interesting is that couples who expect the least challenges in their relationship end up having a harder time when they actually do face challenges. So let me say that again. Couples who expect to not experience challenges end up having a harder time. So you could think about the early years of a relationship. If you just think like, oh my gosh, we get along so well and things are so easy and we just love each other and we want the same number of kids and all those exciting things. And then you do achieve some of those milestones. You get the house, you have children together, and then all of a sudden stuff starts to feel harder. We're not communicating. We aren't feeling as connected, right? Like there's a lot of
And then
things
you add on top of that, well, this wasn't supposed to happen. So is there something wrong with us?
We're arguing. And here's the thing. Maybe because you didn't expect those hardships to come. So you could think that actually expecting there to be challenges, adversity, periods where you don't feel as connected, things you need to work on, things you need to improve in order to maintain your partnership and that love. We talked about that in another episode, right? The 3 aspects of love: passion, closeness, and commitment. Those don't just maintain themselves without effort. Just like you can't expect your car to run really well without maintenance. Now, I'm not trying to call your marriage a car, but you get the analogy. Like you need to have the same mindset about your marriage, that it takes maintaining it takes effort. It's not going to thrive all the time. You're going to face adversity. You're going to face off periods. You're going to have to reconcile differences. I said that to a client earlier today. We were checking in on the phone. And I said, what you need to do, because it's actually their second marriage and they're blending families, you actually need to expect that you're going to misunderstand each other. You're going to miscommunicate. You're going to see things differently. And so when you have that expectation, you won't be as much like, this is a crisis, something's wrong, and you react to it, and then you don't actually tackle it together as a team.
I feel like with all that being said, it's important to note, because as a listener, maybe you think to yourself, well, it's not like painting a great picture of marriage.
I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm not.
Well, and you're not, though. But here's the thing to get. Closeness is not developed in only having positive moments. Like real closeness comes from having a challenge, going through it with a partner, feeling accepted, feeling the support, understanding one another, working through it, and coming out the other side as a different couple, and different people, but like doing that together. And so it really links to the idea that fulfillment should be a real focus of your life and your marriage, and not something like happiness. And that's, to me, where someone listening could have thought different. Like, oh, Jocelyn's painting this picture that it's not all happiness. Well, your individual life outside of being in a marriage or relationship can't be about happiness either. If you did, you'd be living, to be honest, a very impulsive, very selfish life. And that would be all good for a little while, right? It's one of those famous literary works that's like, you could live in a place that had all the food abundance and all of the
things
promiscuity that you want. And then within 2 days, you'd be burning it all to the ground just so you'd have something new to do or something different to do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just wanted to put that in there because it's not just about being happy. Like you will be happy. Like a marriage is great for that. But it's really about, if you're going through challenges, I'm going to face those things in life, which you are, to have someone with you is way better than doing it on yourself. And then also, if you don't have someone else that you're accountable to and responsible for, like a partner and or a child, and even with a child, you get that unconditional love, then like, what are you really doing it for? And then you just kind of you're too impulsive for yourself. And it's like, you just don't have the ability, I think, to really create the fulfillment outside of a marriage.
Great point.
Lastly, since we talked about duration, I'll just say this. If you got to the end of your life and you never were married and you never had kids, it's like you get to the place where you might feel pretty alone
Mm.
and there's no one there for you and there's no one
Mhm.
to take care of you. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I think every sign points to fulfillment being a key focus, and that you can really get that from being in a marriage, one that obviously focuses on passion, closeness, and commitment. And I really am now a believer that having kids really adds to that too,
Mm.
for the various reasons I just mentioned.
All that is great. And because we know some of you listening are in the earlier stages of your relationship, some of you are around that 10-year mark. And then we know we have listeners that, again, have been married 30 plus years. As we go into these habits, these lifestyle choices, you can be focusing on this and get off track or get back on track at any point. So it's not just that you have to fall into the year 7 or 10. But here's the thing, because data shows that dissatisfaction peaks around this time, we want to really give you this wake up call that what we see, because we do sessions with couples every day, is that one partner has been trying to raise a flag for a while. Hey, we need to start working on us. I'm not feeling connected. The other person's like, we're just busy. It's no problem. Hey, I really feel like we're not meeting each other's needs. The other person, again, just doesn't see the urgency. And then when people say they're surprised that their partner suddenly wants to end it or is suddenly saying, I'm so not happy, and then the other person's acting surprised. No, I'm sure your partner has been giving you clues all along. You just haven't been seeing the urgency. And we aren't saying that you're all there, that you're at that point of saying, we're at a make it or break it moment, although we know some of you are. It's important to listen to your partner's cues of saying, I want to maintain our satisfaction. We deserve to focus on us because we know lifestyle factors affect a marriage. Having kids, the early years, so much of your energy and attention is going towards the kiddos. And it's not that it ends there, right? Like you have the teen years and beyond, but there's that adjustment period, especially in the early days. And also work. We know that a lot of you are really trying to be successful in your careers and you've had these life goals that you're trying to achieve, or you have family members that you have to support and take care of. So we aren't undermining that there are circumstances in your life that take time, attention, and energy. We just don't want you to put your marriage on a shelf and think that you can deal with it later, because later will feel harder. So we hope that as we go into this, it's a wake up call. It is a call to action to prioritize your marriage and to focus on what we said in a post today, the subtle actions, the little things every single day. It's not just date night once a week. It's not just the vacation twice a year. It's the little things every day.
That do
And
what? Move your satisfaction forward. And I
mm,
wanted to point that out. You made a nice shift in there. You said someone might come to their partner and say, "Oh, all of a sudden I'm not happy." Then you switch to satisfaction. So
mm,
if you were in a place like that, I would say really make the shift for yourself in your mind that, okay, even if you think you're not happy, the goal isn't happiness.
mhm.
So maybe a better thing to go to your partner with is, "Hey, I'm not as satisfied."
I wouldn't start off with that, by the way. Like
I'm
you got to
saying
put
if
that
you're
in
in a place where you're
context.
choosing between telling your partner that I'm not happy, that's probably going to be a harder place to get on the same page to make any progress.
Mm,
If it was between the two, I would say, "Hey, I'm not as satisfied," rather than, "Hey, I'm not happy."
mm,
Because then your partner sees it as, I have to make my partner now happy.
mm,
That's going to seem like, well, number one, that your happiness depends on me, and that's not a place you necessarily want to be. But okay, I need to raise satisfaction for my
yeah.
partner. Okay, that's not just all happy things. That also means having hard conversations. It also means, okay, I go to my partner and identify, of the main areas of our relationship, where would you score your satisfaction right now? Oh, and on the low ones, okay, what action can I take that would have that satisfaction move forward?
Mm,
Okay, needle mover. Okay, now
mm.
I got three. So if I do these things, it'll move these important areas for you forward in your satisfaction. And all of a sudden, we're in a way different place in a short period of time.
So I know you all just heard that and you were like, whoa, Aaron, like, wait, how do I approach that? When? Let me simplify something for you all as we get into these points. Real practical implementation to maintain your satisfaction. That satisfaction point you just brought up, here's a great question to ask your partner. On a scale of 0 to 10, how high is your love account right now? Because the love account For those of you who are newer to us, it's a way of representing how loved and connected you feel in the partnership. And like a gas tank, it's fluctuating all the time. Or a bank account, right? The bank account is the sum of the deposits versus the withdrawals. And so a great way to measure that satisfaction, it's not that it encompasses everything, but that's a good way to gauge it. And so asking your partner regularly, that's actually part of our family meeting guide, is on a scale of 0 to 10, where's your love account at? Because you want to catch it when it's at a 4 or even a 5
Mhm.
instead of it being a 2 or I'm
Mhm.
at a 1 and I'm like about to bottom out here, right?
Mhm.
I'm in the red. And so asking that question is a great way to gauge it. And then you can follow up with the question, okay, what can I do to help raise that score? To your point, Aaron, like what are the needle movers for you? What are the best deposits that I can make to your love account? So, before we go into the next practical ways to focus on satisfaction, for those of you who want to actually implement this in your daily life and it's easy for you to lose sight of it and all the small things because you get busy, you get in the grind, join our 30-day couples challenge. This is exactly why we created it, because satisfaction isn't just from the things you do weekly or again that twice a year vacation. It's from the small things every day. So we see thousands every single month participate in our 30-day couples challenge. Go to mycoupleschallenge.com. That'll also be linked in the show notes, but it gives you daily prompts to keep your love accounts full, to improve your communication on a daily basis, and it gives you great conversation starters so that you're not just having the life management type of conversations. You're going deeper, and we give you ways to incorporate these questions in an approachable way. So I'll just quickly share. We received an email actually. Someone said, this was so much better for us than talk therapy. And they had tried it for a while. And we're not anti therapy, right? Like there's a time and a place for that. But they said the way we broke it into daily things to focus on addressed it in a more approachable way. So that is my recommendation, is really to participate in the 30-day couples challenge. So go ahead and do that. But with that, Aaron, what is the next practical way to keep satisfaction high?
Checking in and doing it on a more frequent basis. Similar as you just said, if you do feel you're in a season of lower satisfaction, then ideally you have an evening check in daily because you
Mm,
need to know what are the needle movers, what are the deposits I could do, what are the withdrawals I actually made today. Maybe I didn't notice them. And having that be checked in on
mhm,
daily will allow you to offset getting further and further into a low love account or low satisfaction place.
mhm.
And so you can really start to build it up. And similar with our family meeting guide, which you get as a part of the 30-day challenge, you can also be checking in on things like logistically. These are just what do we need to manage our life? Let's get on the same page with those, because just having those handled will have us both feel like there's progress, or at least we're not having little upsets or miscues in our communication.
Yeah.
And then certainly just a gratitude, right? And not
Mhm.
inauthentic, but you can share with them, yeah, I honestly do appreciate you for XYZ.
Yeah.
Just be a good way to have a check in.
I really like that you said that, because so the idea of a check in, right, is that, and that can be a daily check in, it can be a weekly, and they can vary in terms of what you're doing. But we find so often that couples, when you're in that daily grind, you just are like, hey, how was your day? Hey, did the kids do this? Did they finish their homework? Oh, what's for dinner? Oh, we need to clean that up. Oh, hey, can you fix this around the house, right? Like the life management things. And we find that couples then aren't checking in on what you brought up, Aaron. Like they're not expressing how they're feeling that day. They aren't talking about, what they're facing in life, and also expressing gratitude to each other. So that's important. And it doesn't have to be an hour-long conversation every day, because that may not be practical for your life circumstances, but you're right on there with checking in more often, and it not just being life management with each other. Check in on how you both are doing really. How is work really going for you? If it isn't great, don't just say, oh, it's fine, busy. Open up about the pressure that you're facing, the stress, or the excitement. We've said that before, but I think it's important that you are talking about how you're really doing in life or something with the kids. So, next, besides the checking in often and going deeper with each other, the next thing is be receptive to each other. So as time passes, as you get more comfortable, and even as you kind of build up little frustrations with each other, the withdrawals that kind of catch on and you keep going, is you can start to be more defensive with each other. You can have more corrections. You can have yeah buts to everything that they say, counteract, kind of even compare. One of you says, like, oh man, it was such a long day. And the next person goes, long day? Do you know how long of a week it's been for me? And so you've lost that receptivity to each other where you can open up, where someone can bring up an unmet need or bring something up on their mind, a topic, and you actually hear them out. We said that to several couples this week on sessions, actually, because, one person wanted to bring up moving actually to a different country. Another person wanted to bring up finances, like all these different topics. And they were like, well, I'm afraid it's going to turn into a fight because my partner just normally like has some comment and shuts it down and they're not even willing to talk. It's like, explore it. Even if your partner wants to bring up an idea and maybe you don't love it initially, take some time to actually hear them out, explore, oh, that's interesting. Okay, let's talk about it. Like, if we were to do that, what would that look like? Or tell me more about why that's important to you. I want to understand. So that receptivity, that willingness to have these conversations, to explore it before you just shut down a conversation is really big.
Just to add in this, as we get to the last point, we've talked about that VSA model before, and I just really like it because though it's very kind of general, it's not as specific, you're just going to have challenges come up in your life that you're not going to foresee.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're each different people in some regard, from personality traits to upbringing, so attachment styles. And you bring those two things together. Well, it's not about either of those individually, it's about how you then adapt together. And so, a lot of what you're mentioning here on having this check in, being more receptive to each other, and this last point is you just have to be repairing after conflicts. That's all to me falling into the adaptability sort of category.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the key thing. Again, you can have external stresses, you can have just what's called these enduring vulnerabilities between your past and your current personality. Those two come together. And what you do with it, how you adapt, how you have these conversations, how you repair, how often you
Mm.
check in, making deposits to your love account, all of that is what moves you towards satisfaction.
Yeah.
That satisfaction is then what can lead you to a successful relationship long term.
And if you think about it, not just builds satisfaction, but it prevents from the blocks between you building up. So I like to think about how your efforts and your actions in the relationship are either creating a bridge between you, right? To think visually, or a wall between you. So you can like stack these bricks between you, causing disconnection, causing distance when you aren't repairing. So exactly right. That's
Hmm.
that's why you'll hear us address repair and cleaning things up and taking responsibility after things because again, we talk to couples all day every day, and when people say, "Oh, I want to feel closer. I want to feel like we're more connected." A lot of times it comes down to something they didn't repair, that they're not resolved about, so they're still kind of distant. Because if you think about it, if you don't have something resolved, like let's say your partner says something really harsh in a conflict, just as an example, and it doesn't get repaired, you might be able to get to business as usual again because you just kind of have to get back into the groove. But there's a part of you that still feels wounded, still feels hurt. And what we do to protect ourselves is we distance in some way. So we can distance literally physically. We can also distance just kind of energetically. We're not putting as much energy into things emotionally. We can not be kind of opening up as much to them. So there can be many forms of that, but it's a protective mechanism. I'm still wounded. It hasn't been addressed. And I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to distance myself. And when that compounds, many arguments over time, you wonder, why don't we feel as close? Why aren't we as intimate? Why am I not as attracted to my partner or vice versa? Well, because those bricks have been laid and created this wall between you. So I know that repair is uncomfortable because so many of us were not taught this growing up. Maybe we were taught to say, just say you're sorry, which is not enough, usually, especially in a romantic relationship. And I know it's uncomfortable to go and take responsibility and to, kind of explore the root cause, because that's a part of our whole repair process. But you got to get out of your comfort zone, because just doing what's comfortable may not lead to the outcomes that you want in the relationship. So in many ways, to protect your relationship, to keep satisfaction alive, you have to do what's uncomfortable or what's out of your comfort zone,
And if I could
like
add to
repair.
that, it would just be changing the behaviors necessary to better meet the needs of your partner.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's uncomfortable, that's fine. But I want that to be specific. Every time I've heard get out of your comfort zone, I personally gloss over it because I'm like, oh my gosh, everyone has said that forever.
Oh.
But in this case, it's like, well, it's true. But what does that mean specifically?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you just going to take the same actions, be in the same routine, take the same behaviors only because you've always done it and it's familiar? Or are you going to be more intent on building satisfaction, being more adaptive, understanding your partner's need and them for you, and then making the changes needed, even if it's not your quote unquote preference, to actually meet that need and raise you guys' satisfaction together?
That's a really good one you gave kind of as a bonus of how to maintain this satisfaction from the ones we've already said is you have to care about meeting each other's needs. You may not always like have the same important ones. You might see it a little bit differently, but you have to care to mostly want to meet each other's needs and have to reconcile when there is one that it's like, I just can't meet that one. For example, like if you were like Aaron, like, I want a partner who will just play tennis with me. And I have to, it's so important to me. And I was like, oh, I literally despise tennis. Then we'd have to reconcile that, right? So it's not about how you have to kind of be someone that you're not, but most of the time, if you talk through it, there are win-win solutions for meeting each other's needs.
I guess I feel now that I need to say this
Sure.
part that we need to debunk this,
Mm.
and it's that opposites attract. That's just, I guess I thought it was true for a while, but I learned recently that there's literally no evidence. There's no empirical evidence. There's no study that could actually say this is true. Your closeness and your sort of attraction to someone comes from your similarities much, much more than it does your differences.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, well, I don't know if I believe that. Well, think about your friendships. The reason you have the friendships you do, and as good of the friendships and the social groups you belong to, is because of what you have in common.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, period, end of story. So why do we think that that would be any different for a romantic relationship?
Mm-hmm.
It's not. It is the things you have in common and that are similar that bring you together. Once you have that, you will recognize that there's probably differences in your personalities that then add to the flavor, because you don't want the same to be in a relationship with the same person as yourself.
It'd be boring, yeah.
And actually, you can't be too dissimilar. But and I'm like usually a little bit more extroverted. I mean, we're both pretty extroverted, is kind
But
of the
you're
point.
more for sure.
I'm a little bit more. So
Mm-hmm.
someone that's more extroverted, it tends to have another person that's more introverted step into social interactions when they normally wouldn't, and then they have a good time, for
Mm-hmm.
example, right?
Yeah.
And though you can do that for all the personality traits. But I just felt like debunking that. It's because it's not. Opposites don't attract.
Or they might for
Similarities
just infatuation. Maybe, like maybe a short, like we talked about the different levels of love, the different type of relationships.
Mhm.
Maybe for a short fling, they might from time to time,
Oh
but
yeah,
not a
yeah. Well,
sustainable
yeah. Like in your
relationship.
intimacy, you need spontaneity and you need
Mm-hmm.
newness. You can't have it be the same. Sort of being attracted to what you have in common is
Mm.
different than being in the routine and having like no conscious awareness on how your patterns are affecting your partner, right?
Mm.
Like you need spontaneity as well, but I think that can be a lot
Yeah.
different than whether we're similar or not. So I went on a way tangent there.
Yes.
Just felt like debunking that opposites don't attract. It's just not true.
Good point. Now, bringing it back, right? Because we want you to implement these things. This isn't just about hearing something, it's about implementation. So the point is, whether you're at year 2, year 40, maybe you're at the year 10, you're feeling the quote unquote the itch. We're not talking about some kind of skin disease, but you're feeling like you're not at your best as a couple. And for some of you, that might be like a dull ache. And for others, it feels like painful. You're at different stages. Regardless, right now, you can make a change. If you're willing to prioritize the relationship, you're willing to identify the things that you two need to work on as a team. So we gave several here. You may want to re-listen and identify the one or two that you really need to focus on right now. I really think that when it comes to starting off the year on a great note, there's nothing better that you can do than focus on your love account and noticing that you want to give more deposits and reduce the withdrawals, and focusing on the daily things, the small little ways that you show each other that you're connected, that you're present, that you appreciate each other. So my final invitation to join the 30-day couples challenge before it starts on the 1st. So go to mycoupleschallenge.com. That'll also be linked in the show notes. And we just so appreciate you being here. If you're new, make sure you hit subscribe so you can hear upcoming and past episodes. And also, it really helps us if you give us a rating on whichever platform. We're hoping that you don't think it's, giving us a negative rating. Hopefully you want to give us, the high stars up there. So those really make a difference for us when you give us those positive reviews. But we love you guys, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.